You ready?
Yep.
All right.
Okay. What?
What? You still can't trust him. You've got to keep him on your bench unless you're running into issues at quarterback. I really
Pause. Cat, get off of me. He is clawing my leg. Hi guys, welcome to 32 and 32. I'm Jen.
I'm Nate.
And we are here to break down all 32 teams in 32 minutes for you. We actually only have 30 teams this week again because we already had the Thursday night game. But if we've got time, we can talk about that at the end. We will see. We are just here to deliver everything to you, everything fantasy relevant in a short amount of time.
Yep. So you can move on with your day. We're going to be hitting you this week just a little bit late. It's been a weird week for us getting home from Mexico. As you can see, we're back in our home studios, or if you're listening, we're back in our home studios. It's been a wild week. So we're recording this on a Saturday afternoon now. Get it to you just in time to tinker with your lineup Saturday evening and Sunday morning.
Yep.
Well, should we get started?
Yep. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it.
First up, I think we should talk about Washington, Atlanta. We'll start with Washington. There's not much to love here, even with the return of Curtis Samuel from IR. You're probably not starting Tyler Heinicke unless you have to. He did have a good week 2 weeks ago. And
this could be a week where he does decent against Atlanta. They don't have a very good defense, but still, he's not. Yeah, still.
Yeah. Antonio Gibson has been a major disappointment so far outside of that one 83-yard touchdown catch last week. He really didn't do much. Sorry, I'm distracted again because here comes a cat and he's going to start scratching on the chair. But that could change this week against a mediocre Atlanta run defense. J.D. McKissic could return to fantasy relevance as well this week. And even with the return of Samuel, he figures to be involved in the passing game, much like he was in week 2 against the Giants. Terry McLaurin is also a solid volume play this week. And Adam Humphries is probably still floating around on your waiver wire, but he's not worth an ad right now.
No, I've seen some people talking about him, and I just don't think, he's definitely not worth the ad. All right, so not a ton to talk about this week with Atlanta. Matt Ryan is still someone you can't trust. You're going to want to bench him if you can. Mike Davis continues to be a disappointment. He's just not getting as much volume, and he's not doing anything with the carries he is getting. Cordarrelle Patterson, on the other hand, has been a great running back in that system so far. He seems to be getting most of the passing game work, which for Matt Ryan, he needs to get the ball out of his hands quickly. Patterson gives him that ability. Patterson's a guy you're going to want to start this week. Calvin Ridley's a wide receiver 1 in that system, so you're definitely starting him if you've got him, especially against Washington, whose defense has not been as good as expected this year. And that could bode well for Kyle Pitts. This could be the week he breaks out. We keep waiting for it. It's going to happen. Then Olamide Zaccheaus had a touchdown last week, but don't count on that again this week. Chances are it's not going to happen. He's a guy who's going to snag a couple this season, but you never know when it's going to be.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So next, Jen, why don't you start us off with the Houston Texans and the Buffalo Bills?
As we predicted, Mark Ingram has been a dud since his week 1 performance that netted him 14.5 fantasy points. You definitely don't want him in your lineup this week. Davis Mills may have a breakout game soon, but this week probably won't be it. Really, the only play in this offense, I would say, is going to be Brandon Cooks. The volume will be there for him every week, and he's the only weapon on this team right now, really. Every other player in Houston needs a touchdown to even be remotely relevant at this time, and our recommendation would be to stay away.
Yeah, definitely. Not a whole lot going on in Houston that's positive for fantasy outside of Brandon Cooks. Yeah. So let's move on to Buffalo. So Josh Allen exploded for 4 touchdown passes against Washington last week. He's a guy you're starting. Zach Moss has had 2 good weeks. He should continue to see some of those red zone touches. We like him as a nice play as an RB2 or a flex. Devin Singletary has really cooled off after a hot start. He's somebody that you want on your bench. Cole Beasley leads the team in receiving yards. Who expected that coming into this season?
No one.
No one.
Not me.
Yeah, and he's continuing to see an increased volume. He's a guy you're going to want to get in there. He's a great volume play. He snagged a couple touchdowns so far this season. Stephon Diggs has had a slow start by his standards, but don't panic. You're still going to start him this week, especially against Houston. Dawson Knox, 2 weeks with a touchdown now. He's seeing those red zone opportunities that are starting to make him a fantasy relevant tight end. if you've got him, this would probably be a good week to start him. If you're looking at someone like Robert Tunyon or Eric Ebron, Pat Freiermuth, some of those guys, you can start him over those guys and feel good about it.
Yeah.
And Emmanuel Sanders, shockingly enough, he could be a good sneaky flex play this week. He's been seeing more volume in the offense. Mm-hmm. He's getting opportunities. Josh Allen has found a comfort in him. Throw him in as a flex this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. Let's head over to Detroit and Chicago. We saw Jared Goff come back down to earth this past week. He looked pedestrian against one of the worst passing defenses in the league. Chicago has a much better defense, and this is a good week to sit Goff. Same goes for Quintez Cephas, sadly. After a hot first 2 weeks, he saw one target against Baltimore. TJ Hawkinson is a play, as he is every week, and it's also looking like DeAndre Swift is becoming a must start. Jamal Williams is getting red zone carries, so you could throw him in as a flex this week if you wanted to. If you wanted to take a little bit of a risk, he might snag you some points.
Yeah, he's a guy that I don't mind pivoting to, given all these injuries that we're seeing this week, which we'll get to a lot of those. It's just been awful. Trying to figure out your lineups this week is a mess.
And it's minute by minute. It's like every single time you look at Sleeper, open your phone, another injury. It's infuriating.
Oh yeah, no, it's been wild. So a team that is dealing with injuries and Matt Nagy, maybe the new Adam Gase, the Chicago Bears. Terrible play calling last week. Terrible. On 31 dropbacks, 31 pass plays, 20 times they went with 5-man pass coverage. I don't know why you do that to a rookie quarterback. That makes any of the quarterbacks he decides to start this week, whether it's Andy Dalton, Justin Fields, or Nick Foles, they're not startable. You probably assume that anyway, but not even in flex at this point. You can find other options, non-quarterback options to put into a super flex slot. That said, David Montgomery's a go. I would start him up. You would think they're going to lean more on the running game. That gives Montgomery more volume. He's also a good short outlet. They've been using him a little bit in the passing game. You like to see it. So Montgomery's a guy I want to start. The Allen Robinson catch percentage is concerning, but I'm probably going to I'm starting him anyways. Darnell Mooney disappeared last week, but Detroit is 24th in passing yards allowed so far this season amongst NFL defenses. Mooney could rebound this week. I'm playing him, but I'm cautious about where I'm playing him and how I'm playing him, mostly flexes.
Yeah.
Now we're going to move on to Carolina and Dallas. This is an interesting matchup. These two teams are, I think, about what most people thought they'd be. Carolina's been considerably better. Right now, with Carolina, Dallas is allowing the second most passing yards per game in the NFL. Sam Darnold has already been magnificent, and now he gets to just destroy this pretty terrible Dallas defense. DJ Moore's been stellar. He's a guy that you should start. Robbie Anderson's start has been concerning. I think a lot of us thought that the fact that he and Darnold had played together in New York was going to help him be far more relevant than he's been so far this season.
Yeah.
I really don't think you should be starting him this week. Head coach Matt Rule did acknowledge that they're not using him enough, but I don't know if they're going to get him involved against Dallas. Chuba Hubbard is trending up with Christian McCaffrey out. He's kind of a wait and see for us. See what he does this week. I wouldn't recommend starting him this week. Jen would not recommend starting him this week. He's a guy I think you should stay away from. And there you go. That's Carolina.
Pick him up, but just don't start
him up. Don't start him.
If he's even available. I mean, I found that he's available nowhere, and yet he's not rostered anywhere. I don't know what's going on with Sleeper. But anyways, I did try to snag him because I do have several shares of CMC, and he's not available. But if I did have him, I wouldn't probably start him this week.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. He's new to the offense. There's a lot of getting used to it, getting used to the NFL speed on a full-time level. So, yeah, I'd stay away from him.
Yeah.
What do you think about Dallas this week?
Well, I mean, Carolina's top-rated pass defense will be without cornerback J.C. Horn this week against the best wide receiver duo in the league between Dak, CeeDee Lamb, and Amari Cooper. They're all starts, obviously. Carolina also boasts the best rushing defense in the league. And, I mean, we've been watching Ezekiel Elliott. He's been up and he's been down, but he's been much improved since week one. While he's splitting work with Tony Pollard, he's been efficient when he gets the ball. We don't love him this week because of the matchup, and the same goes for Tony Pollard. Dalton Schultz is the clear tight end one in Dallas, and not a bad start if you have him. He had a huge week last week against Philly. Huge. Can he do that again? Probably not likely, but he should still have good volume for PPR leagues.
Yep. Dalton Schultz. I thought it was going to be Blake Jarwin, but man, it's Dalton Schultz for sure.
Man, were we wrong?
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, it does happen.
So next up, we've got Indianapolis and Miami.
Yeah. Carson Wentz was limited in practice this week as he continues to recover from his ridiculously 2 sprained ankles from week 2. While he did play last week, he wasn't anything special. And honestly, I expect more of the same this week. Michael Pittman is a good volume flex play this week. Zach Pascal is touchdown dependent and probably isn't worth starting unless it's absolutely necessary. Jonathan Taylor has been a huge disappointment without getting any red zone work and seeing almost no targets in the passing game. It's hard to want to start him, which sucks. That said, this Miami defense gives up a lot of yards on the ground. This could be the week we see him break out. Nyheim Hines is getting the passing volume to be a relevant flex start again this week. So if you want to pop him in there, I am.
I should have had him in Scott Fishbowl last week, and it really bit me that I didn't. Yeah. Now the Miami side of this, I mean, Jacoby Brissett's the starting quarterback there right now with Tua out. That makes it hard for me to trust this offense long term. Like Myles Gaskin has been a dud. Malcolm Brown isn't seeing the red zone work we thought he would. Jalen Waddle's getting the majority of the volume in the passing game. He's a solid flex play, which isn't something I thought we'd be talking about this early in the season with him.
Right.
Will Fuller's questionable for week 4, but even if he plays, he's probably not going to be fantasy relevant this week. He wasn't last week. I just don't see him being a thing. Devontae Parker is catching barely 50% of his targets on the season so far. That's concerning to me. I don't think he's someone you want to start. And it appears Mike Gesicki was very overrated as a tight end coming into this season. I wouldn't be starting him either.
No, agreed.
Nope.
Okay, Cleveland, Minnesota. Baker Mayfield hasn't been fantastic so far this season for fantasy. He hasn't been awful, but he hasn't been fantastic. He remains a decent super flex play, but that's about it. He could have better numbers this week against poor Vikings pass defense, but we'll see there. After a disappointing week 3 against Chicago, look for Nick Chubb to rebound. Kareem Hunt had a big week last week, and that looks to carry over. With Jarvis Landry out, Hunt is a big part of this passing game, so I'd be starting him, of course. And Odell Beckham, he came back. He made his 21 debut last week, and he actually looked decent. I think he looked good.
So, okay, I will talk about the Minnesota Vikings. Kirk Cousins continues to be efficient this season. It's been great to see there, especially for Justin Jefferson, who's looking great. He didn't start out phenomenal, but you got to start him now. He's starting to see that volume again from Cousins. Adam Thielen is a touchdown hog. He is the red zone target for Kirk Cousins. You have to start him every week. Dalvin Cook is questionable, likely is going to play from what we've been reading today. However, that said, Cleveland has the 5th best running defense in the league. So if Dalvin Cook isn't 100%, if you had to pivot away from him last week, maybe stick with that pivot this week. And if Cook is out, still, please don't start Alexander Mattison.
Not yet.
Alexander, yeah. KJ Osborne has had a couple good weeks. However, that said, he's more likely to be who he was in week 3, where he had 4.6 fantasy points than he was in week 2, when he had 20.1 fantasy points. And with Justin Jefferson starting to see that increased volume, KJ Osborne just really isn't someone you can start.
Yeah, sit him this week.
Yep. So let's move on to the New York Giants and the New Orleans Saints.
Okay. This game looks like it get ugly for the New York Giants. News broke yesterday that both Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard will be out. That leaves Kenny Golladay as a de facto wide receiver 1 in week 4. Daniel Jones hasn't been great, having only 2 touchdown throws so far this year, but that provides rushing upside in super flex formats, and he has 2 rushing touchdowns. So take that as you will. Evan Ingram could benefit from the absence of Slayton and Shepard. Look for him to get some red zone work and maybe snag a touchdown. Yeah. Saquon Barkley looks to be returning to form after a week 3 performance that saw him grab 6 catches from Jones. And I'd say he's a start this week.
Yep. Don't be fooled into thinking that Kadarius Toney is going to do anything. And one other person I wanted to mention here is Colin Johnson. Again, I don't think he's going to be huge this week, but I am starting him a couple places. Mm-hmm. He was that free agent from Jacksonville, that I was hot on last year, and I have him in a lot of dynasty, which we're not talking about now. But in the event that these injuries keep up, Colin Johnson is going to get increased volume. He's someone I'd look at your waiver wire coming up this week. Yep. All right, so New Orleans, Jameis Winston, he's simply not getting enough passing volume at this point to play. You can't start him. There's no real upside to that. He's got 7 touchdowns on the season, but 5 of those were week 1. So there you go. Alvin Kamara, though, thank goodness we were wrong last week to tell you to bench him, because he has gotten a lot more involved in the offense. The Saints are really leaning on the run at this point because their passing attack is just not great. Marcus Callaway showed promise in week 3. He could be a solid flex if you don't have a lot of other options. He might be the one guy in that offense that Jameis can actually throw to. Other than that, I mean, there's really not much this week out of New Orleans. It's going to be fantasy relevant besides that.
Okay.
So let's move on to the Tennessee Titans, the New York Jets. Those injuries, man. Oof. Yeah, this has just been brutal this week. Julio Jones and AJ Brown are both out. That's going to limit Ryan Tannehill this week. Probably not starting him. If you can flex away from him, if you can maybe stream another quarterback that's on your waiver wire, I would recommend doing it. Derrick Henry should see increased volume on the ground and probably in the passing game as well. A lot of short routes from Tannehill.
Yeah, you're starting him anyways.
Yeah, you're starting him anyways, but like, you can feel extra good about it. Outside of this, with Jones and Brown out, I mean, maybe Anthony Firkser if you're really, really hurt at tight end and you really, really need someone, but I don't love it. Maybe Josh Reynolds might get a little bit more work, but I also don't see that happening. I think Tennessee, mostly outside of Derrick Henry, you want to stay away from this week.
I agree. The New York Jets continue to be a mess. Zach Wilson has 7 interceptions and 2 touchdowns. Like, oof. Backfield has no clear leader, and as such, you just can't start any of them. They are still without a single back over 100 rushing yards on the season. Corey Davis hasn't seen much action since week 1. Braxton Berrios has seen the bulk of the target volume, but definitely isn't someone you want to fire up this week unless things are dire in your lineup. But, I mean, I can't imagine you're going to get much from him.
Yeah, and I can't imagine that your lineup's that dire that you would need to start Braxton Berrios.
I would hope not. That would be, yeah.
Yeah.
You have many other problems if that's the case.
Yeah, you're not winning this year anyway. Forget about it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, Kansas City and Philly. We actually have something to talk about with Kansas City this week, but don't get too excited. The Chiefs signed Josh Gordon to their practice squad on Tuesday after he was reinstated by Roger Goodell. Head coach Andy Reid confirmed on Friday that Gordon will remain on the practice squad for week 4 this week against Philly. We're not excited about this given his age and his history, but anything can happen. Maybe in the next few weeks, we'll be telling you to start him along with Mahomes, Kelsey, and Hill, but probably not. We're also not going to tell you to bench Tyreek Hill yet. While the last 2 weeks have been slightly concerning for anyone who has him rostered, it's not time to panic yet.
No, Tyreek Hill is Tyreek Hill, and Kansas City's going to figure this out. It's weird to see them 1-2. They're going to figure it out. They're going to be the Kansas City we all know, and I mean, not necessarily love, but the Kansas City we all know.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Philly.
Okay.
I don't know that there's a ton to talk about here either. Kansas City so far this season has given up the 2nd most rushing yards in the league. We love this for Miles Sanders breakout. We've been waiting for him to do something. And for Hurts rushing upside. He leads the Philadelphia Eagles in rushing yards. So you're going to want to start Jalen Hurts. Devontae Smith and Jalen Reagor really both need a touchdown to make starting them worthwhile. Could that happen this week? Sure. You're probably starting Devontae Smith if you've got him. Jalen Reagor, maybe flex him if you're feeling spicy. And the thing is, though, is that Philly's going to keep the ball on the ground a lot this week against Kansas City. That makes Goddard and Kenny Gainwell even if he starts. If you can go elsewhere with those guys, I would recommend doing it. Okay, well, let's move on to the Arizona Cardinals and the Los Angeles Rams. Kyler Murray should have a nice day. He's just so talented. He might be the QB1 at the end of the season when we look back on it for fantasy. I might consider benching DeAndre Hopkins versus Jalen Ramsey this week, and I know that sounds really weird.
Yeah.
But that matchup concerns me. And you lean on D-Hop to get a lot of points. And if you have someone else that you can throw into that wide receiver slot instead of him, and I would recommend doing it. However, that said, Christian Kirk and Rondale Moore could benefit from the Hopkins Ramsey matchup. They're guys I'd probably be looking to fire up in a flex. Edmonds and Connor are probably both a flex this week at best, and probably every week the rest of the season. They need a touchdown to be relevant. And that's not guaranteed with Murray as the quarterback.
Right.
He steals a lot of that rushing work from them. So proceed with caution on those guys.
Mm-hmm. Yep. This Ram stack of Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp has been unreal this far.
Unreal.
It's been amazing to watch, especially if you have shares in either guy. They combined for 365 yards and 5 touchdowns through 3 games, and there are no signs of it slowing down, even against a stingy Arizona pass defense. Outside of Kupp, maybe you start Woods as a flex with potential touchdown upside. Darrell Henderson is back, and according to head coach Sean McVay, he is a 100% go, and that makes him a viable running back 2 or flex option.
All right, so yeah, I agree with that. I'm not excited about Darrell Henderson, but I mean, everybody in your lineup can't be exciting. That's just not the way fantasy football works.
Right.
If it was, it'd be less fun. It would be too easy to set your lineup every week.
Right. Exactly.
Yep.
Okay,
all right,
let's talk about Seattle and San Francisco. Seattle is, again, pretty clear cut this week. Russell Wilson is a start. Chris Carson is an easy running back 1 choice. DK Metcalf returned to form this last week, and you're going to want him in your lineup. Tyler Lockett is still a start, as he will be, if he's healthy, all season long. Gerald Everett is on the COVID reserve list, so make sure he's on your bench. And that's really it for Seattle.
Yeah, I have literally not one thing to add to that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about San Francisco. They're similarly easy this week in a different way. Stay away from that backfield. Elijah Mitchell is questionable this week, and Sermon was a non-factor last week in the lead running back role. So you don't want to start either one of those guys. You're not starting Jimmy Garoppolo unless you absolutely have to, and that should only be in super flex formats. Deebo Samuel's a good volume start for PPR. So, I mean, you can probably start him with confidence. Outside of that, there isn't really, I mean, Brandon Ayuk has been nothing. He's been he's done nothing. He's useless in fantasy right now. George Kittle's questionable this week, but if he's a go, you're going to start him. He's going to break out here. I know there have been concerns about his volume as well. That will change. It'll get better. It's going to get a ton better. That's all. I think that's all I've got for San Francisco.
Okay, then let's talk about Pittsburgh and Green Bay. Pittsburgh's passing attack is a mess. Ben Roethlisberger has looked awful. You cannot start him unless you have 0 other options, as in my case. Chase Claypool has officially been ruled out for Sunday, making Deontay Johnson a solid flex play. Najee Harris is a smash play this week. His involvement in the passing game last week should continue into this week. He's a safety outlet for a battered quarterback who needs to get the ball out of his hand quickly. Will he have another 19-target outing? Probably not, but the PPR upside is undeniable.
Yeah, and that was crazy to see last week. And Big Ben is a mess. I don't know how he's on the field. He is limping around now.
I know.
And that offensive line is terrible.
Yeah.
So Najee Harris, I think, is the big play this week in Pittsburgh. Yeah.
I agree.
So now for Green Bay. So Aaron Rodgers has been solid after that terrifying week 1 where it's like, oh no, what did we do?
Why did he come back?
Dude, you should have hosted Jeopardy. But now we're glad he's back. You're starting him. Aaron Jones has cooled off after a 41-point week 2, but he's still a start. He still has high upside. He's going to be a guy who's going to replicate that 41-point game a couple more times this season. Start him. A.J. Dillon still a non-factor.
It's maddening.
This is what happens when you base your rankings on a running back on the size of his thighs.
Yeah.
This is a Mike Davis statement as well. Dillon's still a non-factor. Devontae Adams, he's the clear wide receiver 1. He's the guy that you want to be starting. He's the only guy you want to be starting that is a pass catcher in this offense. Marquez Valdez-Scantling's out this week, so he was really the only other viable option here. And Tanyan, he's just simply not seeing enough volume to play him. If you've been starting him and waiting him for something to happen, it just hasn't happened. And against Pittsburgh, I don't think it's going to happen this week. Another guy I'm still waiting to make an impact that I thought was going to make an impact really early on is Randall Cobb.
I know.
Still waiting. May or may not happen. He's just a guy simply that's not fantasy relevant right now. Yep. So let's move on to our home game this week, Baltimore at Denver.
Yep. Baltimore has a real test this week going against one of the best all-around defenses in the league. Lamar Jackson is absolutely a star, as he is every week. Tyson Williams had an off week last week. This probably isn't the week he breaks out of that funk. So I'd keep him on your bench. Latavius Murray is a flex if you're desperate. Starting any wide receiver here is tough as well. Rashad Bateman will be making his NFL debut this week. We'll be interested to see how he looks, but this is not the week to start him. And then obviously Mark Andrews is a go.
Yeah, I am really excited to see what Rashad Bateman can do in this offense.
Me too.
Just not this week.
Not against Denver.
Yeah. So speaking of Denver, Teddy Bridgewater, man. Oh, he's continuing to shine. He's
so
outperforming expectations. He's a great super flex start. At this point, I think he might even be a viable start in a 1 QB format this week.
I agree.
Yep. Melvin Gordon is questionable this week. Javonte Williams, because of that, we're assuming is probably going to see some increased volume. I do believe the Gordon injury is ribs, and that tends to affect running backs pretty hard because they get hit a lot in that upper body. Javonte Williams has some sneaky upside this week, so I'd be looking at getting him started in your leagues if you've got him. Tim Patrick and Cortland Sutton, they're going to be smash plays this week. Baltimore oddly doesn't have a great defense, which feels weird to say, but they just don't. Noah Fant should see some increased volume this week as well with KJ Hamler out on IR for the season. Yes, let's hope. A lot of people are relying on Noah Fant. Yes, sad about Hamler. Was really excited to see what he could do in his wide receiver 3 role when he had it. Obviously couldn't stay healthy. And then we've got Albert Bonham. He could be a very sneaky play with this week with real sneaky upside. I think he could see some volume with Hamler gone. We'll have to see, but he's a possible flex if you're looking at your lineups this morning, Sunday morning, Saturday evening, whenever you're listening to this. Take a look at what else you've got and maybe think about it. Yeah. So now we're going to move on to the game that everyone has been talking about this week. We've got the Tampa Bay Bucks at the New England Patriots. It's a Brady revenge game. It's a Brady revenge game without Antonio Brown, who's been ruled out. He's on the COVID list. Giovanni Bernard is out with a rib injury. And Gronk is out with also a rib injury. Lots of rib injuries this week. So that makes things a little bit interesting because Gronk has had such phenomenal outings this year.
I knew it wasn't going to last. I called it last week.
You did call it last week, and it did. He could come back and return to form, but I feel like this is probably 2 to 3 weeks where he doesn't play.
Yeah.
So that said, OJ Howard's probably going to see an increase in volume. He's a risky flex play this week, but the potential upside there is huge. Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are a go, especially with AB out and Gronk out. They're probably going to see an increase in volume because Brady wants to stick it to Belichick in New England. Ronald Jones is going to be a non-factor in the backfield this week, again, even with Giovanni Bernard out. Leonard Fournette is going to get the bulk of the carries, and he has some upside in the passing game that you like to see. I think Leonard Fournette's a guy you want to fire up this week.
Yep, agreed. This feels like a good week to sit most of your New England players. James White is out, which could benefit Jonnu Smith in the passing game. He's a risky tight end flex play, but if you've got him, it's not a bad choice. Oh. Damian Harris is a start, as he's going to see a lot of work this week. Mac Jones has been shaky. I mean, as expected from a rookie quarterback, but we all had such high hopes for him. Yep. You're not starting him unless you absolutely have to. I mean, Jacoby Myers is the wide receiver 1 here by a lot, and he could see great volume upside this week against the leakiest secondary in football. That's all you need to know about the New England side of this game.
Yeah, pretty simple. Yeah. Jacoby Myers, wide receiver 1. Who would have thought after all the money they paid Nelson Aguilar?
Right.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to the Las Vegas Raiders and the Los Angeles Chargers, which
this is our last matchup we're talking about today.
Last game of the week.
Okay. Last game of the week. So Las Vegas continues to amaze and surprise everyone. Derek Carr has been phenomenal, and you're obviously starting him. Josh Jacobs could be back this week. And if he is, you should definitely fire him up. If he doesn't, you shouldn't be pivoting to any other running backs here, though. Kenyon Drake isn't seeing volume with or without Jacobs, as we saw last week when Peyton Barber went off and now leads the team in rushing yards. Can Barber do that again this week? We're not betting on it, so it's too risky. Darren Waller continues to be Darren Waller, so obviously he's a start. Henry Ruggs and Hunter Renfrow continue to see enough volume from Carr, but I'd say you have to start both of them, either one of them if you have either one of them.
Yeah, which is, I didn't think we'd be talking about Hunter Renfrow this season. Right? I figured it'd be Ruggs, Waller, and maybe Bryan Edwards, but Bryan Edwards really hasn't emerged and done anything. The one thing I do want to say about this matchup that cracks me up about the Raiders in general, is they've got Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake. Peyton Barber gets one start and leads the team in rushing.
I know.
They signed him off of the Washington football team's practice squad. Just wild. The NFL is crazy.
Yes.
It's crazy. So let's move on to the last team we're going to talk about this week, the Los Angeles Chargers. Justin Herbert, as he is every week, is a start. Austin Eckler has been phenomenal since week 1, where he didn't see a single target in the passing game. He has now caught all 15 passes thrown his way in the last 2 games. On top of his rushing upside, he's a smash start, but I didn't have to tell you that. Keenan Allen and Mike Williams have both proven to be pretty phenomenal, and they're a great wide receiver tandem.
Yeah.
You need to get them both in your lineups. And I think we can agree that Jared Cook continues to show he's just simply not a volume play. Week 1 against Washington was an anomaly. Risky, low upside flex play at best if you have no other options. But I'm guessing you probably do, because he's probably on the waiver wire in your league.
Probably.
Yep. I think that wraps it up. I do think we have a quick second here. I would like to talk real quick about what we saw on Thursday. Yeah. So we had the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati.
Crazy game. It was absolutely crazy.
It was crazy. And I think something that's encouraging about all the hype behind Trevor Lawrence was seeing how he's starting to adapt to the NFL speed, and he's making better decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. You could see that, especially in the second half of the game. The first half of the game was to be expected. It was exactly what we were talking about last week, which is don't start or touch anybody in Jacksonville until we know what is going to happen. And
even though they were up 14-0.
Yes, exactly. But the second half of that game, he was looking good.
My boy Laviska Shenault, man, he looked great. And I think he's the guy that you're going to want to be starting the rest of the season. He seems to have become that safety outlet for Trevor Lawrence. And you love to see it. They're using him more in the passing game rather than trying to put him into wildcat packages and trying to get him rushing yards and rushing touches.
Yeah.
And James Robinson finally had a game where it's like, this is the guy we were expecting to see.
Yes, finally.
Yes, finally. All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in, whether you're on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. We appreciate the listens. We appreciate the support. We're just here to help you guys win. That's why we show up and do this every week. We love football. We're happy to do it. Check us out on Twitter at 32and32FF. We're also on Instagram and TikTok. And like I said, YouTube. Make sure you're following and subscribing everywhere so you don't miss any of our content. Coming up next this Tuesday, we have David Cruz with the 32 and 32 waiver wire show, where he's going to help you manage those waiver wires so you can get to this point where you're setting your lineups and feel confident about what you're doing.
Yes.
Yep. All right, guys.
Bye, guys. Good luck this week. We will see you next week.